It was Josip Broz Tito who came up with the idea of building the railway from Belgrade to Bar in 1952. It was supposed to be an exemplary instance of an ability of socialism to modernise even the natural obstacles cut off parts of the territory of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, and indeed the entire world. The socialist work brigades, consisting mostly of students, were coming from all corners of the country to dig tunnels, build bridges, and lay down railway lines. After the inauguration, more than 20 years later, that line became the key route for the legendary Blue Train, which was Tito's office, hotel, and meeting hall all in one, always ready to go. The personnel of the train consisted mostly of the freedom fighters and anti-colonial politicians of the non-European world, from Arafat to Sukarno. The transformation of the political map of the world from imperialism to multipolar brotherhood was taking shape during the fast ride, as the railway line penetrated the mountainous terrain by 254 tunnels and 435 bridges. Pupils of the passengers were hardly adjusting to alternating pulses of light and dark behind the windows. Tunnel, bridge, tunnel, light, dark. 50 years after the inauguration, the same railway line goes through 3 independent states instead of one federal republic. Its luster is overshadowed by another, from an engineering point of view, even more demanding route that also has the ambition of changing the world. Before our railway line starts descending from the high mountains to the lowland coast of Montenegro, it is crossed by the newly started motorway. It is just a fragment of the biggest global infrastructure project since the beginning of civilization, a gigantic Chinese project called One Belt, One Path. This project is supposed to contribute to world economic growth and fasten planetary distribution of consumer goods and raw materials, regardless of the current global environmental collapse. The roofs of the sleeping quarters of the Chinese workers in Montenegro are blue, as was Tito's train. The workers spent all their time there. They even import food from China. The workers are isolated from families, and at the same time, they lack opportunities to get to know the locals. While checking the dustbins outside of their sleeping quarters, we found unpacked packages of imported condoms. Inhabitants of the states established by the dissolution of Yugoslavia are afflicted by a high level of corruption, nationalism, populism, and wild reconstruction and privatization after the war. In this chaos in which all sorts of things were stolen or bankrupted and the high unemployment level is rising further, there is a hunger for capital and loans from China. Investments and loans are at the same time directly tied to the construction of the over-dimensioned infrastructure, and so the construction continues. Movement of goods is important for these newly created transport routes as a movement of debt, movement of new needs, dependencies, and unsuccessful efforts to end them, mitigate them, or at least to repay them. When Xi Jinping declared the project of the new Silk Road in 2013 in Astana, he declared that close neighbours are better than distant relatives. He summed up the key principle of non-interventionist post-ideological global politics of China. While goods travel smoothly across the mirror-like smoothed surface of the globe, liberated from the physical friction of otherwise wrinkled landscape, human bodies are stuck and inhibited by obligations to fatherland. To achieve mobility, they must redeem themselves either financially or by high social credit. Close neighbours are in this regard connected de facto in the same exact manner by walls, fences, electronic surveillance, as much as by railway lines, motorways, duty-free zones, or charter flights. We find ourselves at the fun fair called Window to the World in the Chinese Special Economic Zone of Shenzhen. The fun fair is a material manifestation of a neo-colonial situation, an anthropological garden. Following walking routes or riding the monorail, within a couple of minutes you can get from Eiffel Tower to a Kenyan village of mud and straw. Groups of Africans in ethnic costumes dance and drum at regular intervals. At the eastern edge of the desert, Sayesik Atirau between Kazakhstan and China, the entire new city is being constructed as well as a trans-border duty-free zone, an inland port, and 450 hectares of a special economic zone. It is one of the most isolated and most sparsely populated areas on Earth. It also has a new key nodal point for the export of goods from China and for import and extraction of raw materials. Shopkeepers do not even pretend that their main goal is to sell at this place. Companies based in Hawkos get significant tax reliefs. Tax optimization is more attractive to them than the purchasing power of local shepherds. During the border check, I am being taken aside for questioning. It is forbidden to enter the zone with a beard, often a symbol of Muslim believers. A higher suspicion is understandable. Up to 2 million Uyghurs are being held against their will for an undetermined period of time in so-called re-education camps around the area. They let me go shopping after I proved to them that I am not a Muslim. I am buying a blanket that says, "I love Gucci Apple," and a couple of following nights I use it while camping in an adjacent barren land. 55 kilometers long bridge between the Hong Kong, Zhuhai and Macau bounds, physically still rather a defiant island periphery to continental China. Many doubt there was any other reason to build the bridge than to create this symbolic connection. It is the world's longest sea bridge. It costs $20 billion, but it can be used only by cars with special permission. The bridge has become a symbol of the Greater Bay Area Plan, part of the new Silk Road at the southeastern coast of China. The entire area should be, according to the Chinese media, transformed into a new Silicon Valley-style hub of technologies and innovations. Faces and moves of the drivers are carefully monitored during the entire ride, and if the drivers yawn too often or drive too insecure, they are automatically stopped. The Pearl River Delta, which is clenched by the bridge, was the site of the Opium Wars 180 years ago. The British were importing this substance from India, despite the Chinese prohibition, and widely spread its usage and addiction to it. Opium was the only commodity that locals were willing to pay for in cash. These were the beginnings of the current type of global capitalism. The newly created demand, disruption, and carefully maintained addictions had devastating consequences. Apart from medical and epidemiological, the outflow of silver liang led to its higher price compared to copper wen, and the following inability of local, mostly rural inhabitants to pay the taxes in silver. Dozens of millions of people died as a result of famines, relocations, violence, and addictions. In October 2013, the FBI found and captured Libertarian Ross Ulbricht, founder and operator of the Silk Road, the first dark web designed to buy drugs used by people in huge numbers that he had operated since 2011. On his website, my generation tested the limits of our freedom and limits of the internet, trading in cryptocurrency, airmail, and our bodies. At the moment when one Silk Road was ended at a different place, Chinese President Xi Jinping declared the new Silk Road for the 21st century. It was as if the dark web shop reincarnated itself at the moment of its death into a new disproportionately bigger body, and its libertarian utopia of a free market and deregulation fused with the Chinese body of centrally planned state capitalism. The Pearl River Delta is nowadays a key producer of so-called research chemicals, chemically modified narcotic substances and precursors which the narcotics can be subsequently made from. These research chemicals are not legally constrained in any way, because they are changing more rapidly than the lists of forbidden substances, and therefore thousands of tons are being distributed to the entire world. The consequences of never tested substances could be completely unimaginable and potentially more serious than the known narcotics. In 1943, Albert Hofmann rode a bike home after he had intentionally intoxicated himself with LSD. It happened during the time of rapid modernization, as well as the Second World War, its termination, and the beginning of the Cold War. The bicycle ride of Albert Hofmann and the psychedelic revolution could not sufficiently slow down the fastening of the economics, the imperative of growth and scientific progress. After all, bicycles were banned from traffic on motorways for its slowness. In 1974, a psychologist, John P. Zubek committed suicide after it had been exposed that his research of sensory deprivation was in the long term financed by the CIA and practically used in handbooks for interrogations and new methods of torture. Zubek exposed the subjects of experiments to the impact of intense light, dark, flashing and noise in closed distressing spaces, often in combination with the application of LSD. He defended his project in the public eyes and probably even in front of himself by necessity of research and eliminate sensory deprivation in long-distance drivers and future pilots of interplanetary flights. Freedom of movement of people seems to be just a fata morgana above the hot asphalt of the Silk Road compared to the free movement of goods. What kind of world is being outlined by the goods passing the re-education camps?